Welcome everyone to the Parasitic Reading Room. We're here with a few of our contributors from our exhibition Non-Depleted. We gathered you around the question what depletion means in the current time, from resource depletion and extraction to critical thinking about social, political, and ecological exhaustion. And now is the time to listen to your thoughts, your ideas, what you combine with this. And now I would like to introduce Rosario. She is like a Berlin-based curator, architect, and editor. And she, together with DPR, invented the Parasitic Reading Room, and now she would explain you a little bit about that.
Hi, everyone. A very short introduction on the Parasitic Reading Room. It was initiated, as Nina said, with dpr-Barcelona in the occasion of the Istanbul Design Biennial in 2018. And we have been doing it since then, taking different shapes and forms. And basically the nature of this format is to parasite different things, from venues to public spaces to virtual exhibitions, as we're doing today. We'll explain very shortly how it works. We have a public chat, and we have shared notes. In the shared notes, you can access the reader. This reader has been composed together with the curators of the exhibitions and the artists taking part on Non-Depleted. And basically, there are fragments of text that resonated with the topic of the exhibition. Go through it and find a fragment of text that you would like to read aloud. And that is what we will exercise today, reading together and reading aloud. Let's start. What if we imagine intellectual life as a peasant woodland, a source of many useful products emergent in an unintentional design? The image calls up its opposites. In assessment exercises, intellectual life is a plantation. In a scholarly entrepreneurship, intellectual life is pure theft, the private appropriation of communal products. Neither is appealing. Consider instead the pleasures of the woodland. There are many useful products there, from berries and mushrooms to firewood, wild vegetables, medicinal herbs, and even timber. A forager can choose what to... Thank you. A forager can choose what to gather and can make use of the woodland patches of unexpected bounty. But the woodland requires continuing work, not to make it a garden, but rather to keep it open and available for an array of species. Human copicing, grazing, and fire maintaining this architecture. Other species gather to make it their own. For intellectual work, this seems just right. Work in common creates the possibilities of particular feats of individual scholarship. To encourage the unknown potential of scholarly advances, like the unexpected bounty of a nest of mushrooms, requires sustaining the common work of the intellectual woodland. This is an extract from The Mushroom at the End of the World from Anna Lovenhaupt-Singh.
Thank you. I will read a piece about solution, and it's from a text called What About Activism? Stephen Henry Madoff. Solution, which is to say what we repair, originates in the Latin verb solvere, to loosen, to unfasten, with the implicit assumption that to unfasten difficulties to be released, to be free. Free from what? From the Latin problema, derived in turn from the ancient Greek word for barrier or obstacle, for a thing thrown down to obstruct the path. The solution is free passage. But is it to walk around or through? Is it to avoid or to confront? Is it to say that the universal is really only a locus, the site of good for a specific group or person? And if that's so, the work of law must always at some fundamental level be held suspect, shouldn't it? Always conditional, the universal and solution touched by the shadow for whom?
If people have been engaging with the possible, and the way the world is today is the result of the possible that they did, then what would the results of imagining and engaging with the impossible?
To the people of Mexico, to the peoples and governments of the world, brothers and sisters, the flower of the world will not die. The masked face, which today has a name, may die. But the word which came from the depth of history and the earth can no longer be cut by the arrogance of the powerful. We were born of the night. We will live in the night. We will die in her. But the light will be tomorrow for others. For all of those who today wept at the night. For those who have been denied the day. For those whom death is a gift. For those who are denied life. The light will be for all of them. For everyone, everything. For us, pain and anguish. For us, the joy of rebellion. For us, a future denied. For us, the dignity of insurrection. For us, nothing. Our fight has been to make ourselves heard, and the bad government screams arrogance and closes its ears with its cannons. Our fight is caused by hunger, and the gifts of bad government are lead and paper for the stomachs of our children. Our fight is for a roof over our heads, which has dignity, and the bad government destroys our homes and our history. Our fight is for knowledge, and the bad government distributes ignorance and disdain. Our fight is for the land, and the bad government gives us cemeteries. Our fight is for a job which is just and dignified, and the bad government buys and sells our bodies and our shames. Our fight is for life, and the bad government offers death as our future. Our fight is for respect, for our rights and sovereignty and self-government, and the bad government imposes laws of the few on the many. Our fight is for liberty of thought and walk, and the bad government builds jails and graves. Our fight is for justice, and the bad government consists of criminals and assassins. Our fight is for history, and the bad government proposes to erase history. Our fight is for the homeland, and the bad government dreams with the flag and the language of foreigners. Our fight is for peace, and the bad government announces war and destruction. Housing, land, employment, food, education, independence, democracy, liberty, justice, and peace. These were our banners during the dawn of 1994. These were our demands during the long nights of 500 years. These are today our necessities.
Perhaps the outrage meriting a name like the Anthropocene is about the destruction of places and time of refuge for people and other critters. I, along with others, think the Anthropocene is more a boundary event than an epoch, like the K-PG boundary between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene. The Anthropocene marks severe discontinuities. What comes after will not be like what came before. I think our job is to make the Anthropocene as short, thin as possible, and to cultivate each other in every way imaginable epochs to come that can replenish refuge. Right now, the earth is full of refugees, human and not, without refuge. From Staying with the Trouble by Donna J. Haraway.
Feeling utopia. A map of the world that does not include utopia is not worth glancing at. Oscar Wilde. Queerness is not yet here. Queerness is an ideality. Put another way, we are not yet queer. We might never touch queerness, where we can feel it as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. I've never been queer, yet queerness exists for us as an ideality that can be distilled from the past and used to imagine a future. The future is queerness domain. Queerness is a structuring and educated mode of desiring that allow us to see and feel beyond the quagmire of the present. The here and now is a prison house. We must strive, in the face of the here and now's totalizing rendering of reality, to think and feel, and then and there. Some will say that all we have are the pleasures of this moment, but we must never settle for that minimal transport. We must dream and enact new and better pleasures, other ways of being in the world, and ultimately new worlds. Queerness is a longing that propels us onward, beyond romances of the negative and toiling in the present. Queerness is that thing that lets us feel that this world is not enough, that indeed something is missing. Often, we can glimpse the worlds proposed and promised by queerness in the realm of the aesthetic. The aesthetic, especially the queer aesthetic, frequently contains blueprints and schemata of a forward-dawning futurity. Both the ornamental and the quotidian can contain a map of the utopia that is queerness. Turning to the aesthetic, in the case of queerness, is nothing like an escape from the social realm. So far, queer aesthetic map future social relations. Queerness is also a performative, because it is not simply a being, but a doing for and toward the future. Queerness is essentially about the rejection of a here and now and an insistence on potentiality or concrete possibility for another world. And this is from Jose Esteban Muñoz, Cruising Utopia, the end and there of queer futurity.
Other biological futures. However, biodesign fans are now repackaging biodesign, describing it as an ecological remedy, a technology breakthrough in economical opportunity in a manufacturing and industrial revolution. For this issue, we're questioning whether biodesign can deliver this accompanying social transformation that those dreams amplify, and explore how we might otherwise begin to challenge modern industrial, social, and economic paradigms. Adopting this more social than technological perspective on biodesign allows us to include within a wide range of activities and people, from traditional to contemporary processes that use low-tech or high-tech methods, practiced by scientists to farmers in labs, factories, studios, and homes. Two questions unite their work. Can biology do it better? And how will using biology change things for good? These approaches provoke thinking about what biology might like and what other kinds of potential biological futures could exist, which we hope this issue begins to sketch out. The growing interest in biodesign is driven by a range of factors. One is the raising concerns on the ecological and social effects of the Anthropocene, humanity's ever-visible impact on Earth, alongside the equally visible failure of earlier green movements to mobilize change. The paradox is increasingly complicating for this contemporary industrial design profession, since capitalism requires a continuous circle of production and consumption to keep designers in work. Our imagination today is limited by today's imaginaries. While biodesign could better some production methods, we think it's more interesting to use biodesign to help us identify new, diverse, biological, ecological, social models that are more equitable for all biology, not just selected humans or for a few monoculture crops. These spaces we create may eventually be cannibalized by capital. Nothing may change.
In comparison to modern environmental destruction, however, it is possible to think of the Holocene as an epoch in which human farming managed to coexist with a wide variety of other living beings. If there is any meaning to the term sustainability, we must look for it in the Holocene ecologies, including those that have managed to hang on in the contemporary world. How did farming maintain its long-durable viability during the Holocene? Holocene farming privileged the same resurgence processes and forest species assemblages as the multi-species expansion that followed the Ice Age, including both local succession and the long-distance travel of plants. Plants had to travel to survive. The cold and drought of Ice Age glaciation pushed out many species. Spaces where those species wiped out elsewhere continued to thrive became refugia. When the glaciers retreated and the world became warmer and wetter, living things spread out from refugia, remaking forests, wetlands, and meadows. In temperate lands, after the first wave of ruderal or weedy plants, forest-forming trees came to occupy also frozen places. Trees are mobile, and thus they can respond to farming. In the spread from refugia, plants show the lively initiative that has helped them survive human disturbances. Disturbance is a comparatively quick change in ecosystem conditions. It is not necessarily bad and not necessarily human. Unfortunately, humanists often misunderstand the term as a way of criticizing human. Without this mistaken implication, it could be a useful term for an anthropology of a world always in motion. Holocene farmers cut back forests, but every time farms were abandoned, forests took back the land. Mimicking their post-Ice Age spread, forests kept returning. Meanwhile, both crops and domestic animals depended on nutrients gained from the forest. Farming not only cut, but also impoverished forests, and yet forests bounced back.
Graham Cain's dirty physiologies. Graham Cain's ecological house or street farmhouse built in London in 1972 is a striking illustration of how architecture intersects with climate change. In his diagram, Cain portrays himself and his family as guinea pigs in order to test the function of several components of the house. He experimented with his waste, his cooking habits, and his use of water, monitoring closely every activity of daily practice until the house was demolished in 1974. The architect, therefore, was an indispensable biological part of the house he built, and he portrayed himself as a combustion engine for generating electricity connected to the house in a diagram where excretion becomes a vital constituent of the system's sustenance. Describing his house as a life support system, Cain satirically argued that the architect, being involved with the house's biological cycles, might now relate to his own shit. This illustration of the dirty physiology of the body, which is woven into the ecology of habitation, is far away from contemporary illustrations of climate change depicted in the statistical surveys. Commonly, environmental concerns promote a conservationist ethic and a list of cautionary daily practices of scarcity. We tend to think of human waste as a phantom material condition related to the management of urban resources. Yet, it infiltrates the air and water we breathe. The exclusion of the body's physiology of contemporary environmental concerns does not allow us to construct a more nuanced perception of climate change and to motivate behavioral change. As Kane shows us, nevertheless, to effect change, one needs to get involved and dirty in architecture production.
Inhale, exhale, self-breathing kit. Here you stand on the only planet in the solar system. Atmosphere sustains life. An imaginary line, Karman, 100 kilometers from outer space, reaches the surface. A tender and gentle blanket of gas penetrates your body, makes you breathe. Like a shaman, protects you from blasts, heat, radiation, emanation from the sun. From extreme colds of poles to tropical heat of the equator, warms our body and planet by day, at night. Intense pressure decreases with altitude, tenderly touching the soil. Your skin, ocean levels. The same ocean that gently floats inside you. It protects and sustains life, water, air, your essence. Yet you forget to breathe. Gas increases while you trap the heat into the atmosphere.
For water, from oxygen, all living forms were able to grow, survive, procreate and colonize this planet, transform it. Yet, you forget to breathe. Your human privilege dancing through biosphere as a divinity, in an ecological orgy that makes you stay alive. You forget to breathe. You stop, you nurture. As paper, your soul dances with technological atoms, transforming itself into a place of no memory, no past, eternal, becoming immortal data until electricity disappears. Water, oxygen, inside, penetrates you through every breath, open pores, yet you ignore it. You simply pretend to forget that below the asphalt lies the beach. Inhale, exhale, forward, back, living, dying, arrows left blow each to each. Meet midway and slice, the boy in aimless fight. Thus, I return to the source. Inhale, exhale by Paulo Arriano.
I'm not proposing a return to the Stone Age. My intent is not reactionary, nor even conservative, but simply subversive. It seems that the utopian imagination is trapped, like capitalism and industrialism and the human population, in one way future consisting only of growth. All I'm trying to do is figure out how to put the pig on the tracks. Ursula K. Le Guin.
Latin America is the region of open veins. Everything from the discovery until our times has always been transmuted into European or later United States capital, and as such has accumulated in distant centers of power. Everything, the soil, its fruits, its mineral-rich depths, the people and their capacity to work and to consume natural resources and human resources. Production methods and class structure has been successfully determined from outside from each area by meshing it into the universal gearbox of capitalism. To each area has been assigned a function, always for the benefit of the foreign metropolis of the moment. And the endless chain of dependency has been endlessly extended. The chain has many more than two links. In Latin America, it also includes the oppression of small countries by their larger neighbors, and within each country, frontiers, the exploitation by big cities and ports of their internal sources of food and labor. For centuries ago, 16 of today's 20 biggest Latin American cities already existed. For those who see history as a competition, Latin America backwardness and poverty are merely the result of its failures. We lost, others won. but the winners happen to have won thanks to our losing. The history of Latin America underdevelopment is, as some has said, an integral part of history of the world capitalism development.
M7 RED and Arena Documenta. Throughout the Americas, settler colonies not only established nation-states and indigenous lands, they also exploit the depths of the Earth's resources. M7 RED and Arena Documenta describe how Mapuche communities are organizing against oil companies in the Vaca Muerta region. Security forces arrived at Campo Maripe community territory the 16th July 2013 at 6 a.m. with eviction orders. That same day, the agreement between Argentine oil company Yacimientos Petrolíferos Fiscales and Chevron would be signed at the provincial legislature. A small group of people of this Mapuche community went to the nearest town and bought lots of bottles for floor cleaning products. We went to the towers, but first we stopped by the trailers where the oil workers sleep and told them, "Don't worry, nothing's happening." They started filling 5-liter fuel cans with the cleaning product. Fuel as far as what the police could tell, and started piling the tower base with firewood branches. "If you don't leave right now, we set this on fire," they warned the police forces. In the meantime, a group of women climbed the tower and chained themselves to the structure. For 48 days, 6 oil workers teams were stuck and were unable to work.
Everything starts from this intuition that what I define as support structures can release potential, and that support is not to be reduced to a reactive, symptomatic, and redeeming gesture, but that through its uttering we might be able to hear the unspoken, unsatisfied, the late and the latent, the in-process, the pre-thought, the not yet manifest, the undeveloped, unrecognized, the delayed, the unanswered, the unavailable, the not deliverable, the discarded, the overlooked, the neglected, the hidden, the forgotten, the unnamed, the unpaid, the missing, the longing, the invisible, the unseen, the behind the scene, the disappeared, the concealed, the unwanted, the dormant. That's from Celine Condrelli's Support Structures.
But according to the accusers, being a spectator is a bad thing for 2 reasons. First, viewing is the opposite of knowing. The spectator is held before an appearance in a state of ignorance about the process of production of this appearance and about the reality it conceals. Second, it is the opposite of acting. The spectator remains knowledge and action, the action of knowing, and action guided by knowledge. This is the conclusion formulated by Plato. Theater is the place where ignoramuses are invited to see people suffering. What the theatrical scene offers them in the spectacle of the pathos, the manifestation of an illness, that of desire and suffering, that is to say, the self-division which derives from ignorance. The particular effect of theatre is to transmit this illness by means of another one, the illness of the gaze enthralled to shades. It transmits the illness of ignorance that makes the character suffer through a machinery of ignorance, the optical machinery that prepares the gazer for illusion and passivity. A true community is therefore one that does not tolerate theatrical mediation, one in which the measure that governs the community is directly incorporated into the living attitude of its members.
One of the most polluting companies that have operated in the continent will soon arrive in our territory, announced a manifesto written by the Mapuche Conference and the Mapuche New Year.
Environmental justice is about the right to remain in one's place, an environment, and be protected from uncontrolled investment and growth, pollution, land grabbing, speculation, disinvestment, and decay and abandonment. As a result, many environmental justice activists are involved in fights around the right to the city, which is connected to degrowth discourses. Using Lefebvre's discourses about the right to the city and the importance of not only controlling spaces of production, but also of using and shaping the city, coalitions such as the Right to the City Alliance in the US demand economic and environmental justice and greater democracy, together with the end of real estate speculation, community space privatization, and gentrification. As they resist the replacement of their community space and gardens by luxury housing, they question projects that maximize exchange value while beautifying and sanitizing the city. In the South, resistance against displacement is often connected to land right movements such as the Via Campesina International, the landless workers' movements in Brazil, or the Bhumi Uchet Patiri Rot Committee in India. From an organizing and political standpoint, such movements frame transformative claims, the need to remain autonomous from the state and construct more spontaneous and direct forms of democracy and decision-making. From an outcome standpoint, environmental justice movements are split between some groups demanding a more radical transformation of the economic system and a move away from a fixation on economic growth. For example, indigenous groups pushing for the concept of sumac causai in Ecuador, or the buen vivir, the good living, are those who want to improve free market capitalism without thanks. And those who want to improve free market capitalism without proposing a true alternative to the current system. They do not make the link with the long-term and broader implications of increased production and consumption, resource extraction, and unequal environmental setting. In sum, environmental justice movements act as a reminder that consuming and producing less is not enough per se. The less needs to be distributed more equally, with people controlling production processes so that cities and rural spaces become more equal. This is from Environmental Justice, Isabelle Angelovsky.
Okay, now we see a picture. I will just describe what I see in the picture. So in the foreground, you see a beach crowded by people going to swim. A little bit after, you see like the ocean. And after that, you see the industries from Rotterdam, like, yeah, big industries with all the windmills and like ships contributing resources around the world.
Miracles and miracle making are manifestation of the impossible. Not because the impossible is impossible, but because the impossible is thought of as such by those that exist in or accept the normalcy of that which is framed as the possible. As for Bradley Scratch Perry, who once said, "I'm a miracle man. Things happen which I don't plan. I've never planned anything. Whatsoever I do, I want it to be an instant action object, instant reaction subject, instant input, instant output. The concept of the impossible seems to be the rule, not the exception.
Miracles are thus the performativity of all those concepts that have been prefixed with im, in, an, or otherwise imply the contrary of opposite, the negative of, as impossible, invisible, inaccessible, unbelievable, unacceptable, unrecoverable. But once the miracle is performed, that is to say, once the prefix is obliterated, the impossible takes form. Beyond these lines, one can understand the greater miracle of perception as braving what has been normalized, as challenging the frames of perception and the rationale of knowing. It requires a teleological suspension and epimistic disobedience of entail reparation of the bonds between the cognition and the plurality of knowledge and literacies through which may manifest. As such, it expands what can be perceived, experienced, done, and imagined.
Power consolidates power. It draws resources in and barricades itself around a central point. Living, sprawling fields of sacrifice, zones at its edges. Oligarchs have already begun to manifest this cocoon of power in our world, in the forms of fortified neighborhoods, cities, countries with armed borders, and privatized police departments. That's episode 2, liquidation of the Institute of Queer Ecology.
Atmosphere. Chemical deposit, 5 meters. Soils. Fractures. Altered zones. Erosion. Mines 50 meters. Mines 10 meters. Mantle rocks. Magmatic rocks. Artificial rocks. Sand. Mines 100 meters. Metamorphic rocks. Continental crust.
I am not proposing a return to the Stone Age. My intent is not reactionary, nor even conservative, but simply subversive. It seems that the utopian imagination is trapped, like capitalism and industrialism and the human population, in a one-way future consisting only of growth. All I'm trying to do is figure out how to put a pig on the tracks. Ursula Le Guin. Does anyone wants to do the closing words?
I was going to read a small passage of the curator's letter by Oliverio. The way we interact is under discussion. Having this in mind, maybe it's a good time, as in every crisis, there is an opportunity to think about the distance we have with things. Is there any distance, apart from the physical one, that sets the way we relate ourselves with reality and events? Jacques Rancière, in his book, The Emancipated Spectator, works around the distance of this expectation. He brings the consideration of Plato, among others, about the negative aspects of distance in theater. Being an spectator is a bad thing for 2 reasons. First, viewing is the opposite of knowing. The spectator is held before an appearance in state of ignorance about the production process of this appearance and about the reality it conceals. Second, it is opposite of acting. The spectator remains immobile in her seat, passive. To be a spectator is to be separated from both the capacity to know and the power to act. Guy Debord wrote, "Separation is the alpha and the omega of the spectacle." Yeah, thanks everyone, especially Rosario, for this wonderful experience. I think it was super nice, my first time doing it, and I really enjoyed it. And of course, thanks to like all the participants and designers, artists, and everyone involved in this. We feel very sorry that we didn't manage to see everyone physically. It was our best intent, but we love you all, and thank you so much for participating in this. It was a really nice experience.